There are no perfect people. They're just people who are really good at pretending they've never messed up. And some of us, we don't pretend. We remember. We carry it. That thing we said, the decision we regret, the moment we wish we could rewind, just 1 minute, one sentence, one choice. I've been there more than once. And what I know from the research and also from my own life is that unforgiven guilt turns into shame, and shame is like rust on our soul. It doesn't just sit there. It eats through us quietly. So the question becomes, how do we forgive ourselves for the things we still feel guilty about? Not ignore, not justify, but really forgive. That's what I want to talk about today. Let's start here. No, guilt is not the enemy. It really isn't, and I think that surprises people because guilt has such a heavy reputation. We treat it like something we should avoid at all costs. But guilt, when it shows up in a healthy way, is actually a signpost. It's our internal compass saying, hey, this didn't line up with who I want to be. That moment you snapped at someone you love, or you didn't show up the way you wish you had. Guilt is the emotional discomfort that nudges you to realign. It says, that's not the story I want to write with my life. In that way, guilt can be profoundly adaptive. It's the emotion that makes repair possible. When I feel guilty about something, it invites me to reflect, to take responsibility, to reconnect with my values. It gives me the emotional data I need to change. And that's a good thing. Here's where it gets tricky. When guilt isn't processed, when we don't do anything with it, it overstays its welcome and it morphs. It stops being a nudge and starts being a weight. That's when guilt becomes toxic and it starts to tangle up with shame. And shame is not helpful. See, guilt says I did something bad, but shame says I am bad. And when we cross over into shame territory, we stop seeing our behavior as something that can be addressed and repaired. We start seeing ourselves as fundamentally broken. And that creates this emotional paralysis. It keeps us stuck. I can't tell you how many people I've sat with, honestly, myself included, who confuse living with guilt for living with integrity. Like if we let go of the guilt, we're somehow saying what we did was okay. But that's not how it works. Holding on to guilt doesn't make you more ethical. It just makes you more exhausted. And it's not a measure of love either. Carrying guilt endlessly doesn't mean you care more. It usually just means you don't know what else to do with the pain. There's actually research that shows chronic guilt and shame are strongly correlated with mental health challenges like depression, anxiety, even addiction. Because when we marinate in guilt, we don't feel worthy of peace. We feel like we have to earn forgiveness, but we can never quite figure out how. That's the loop people get stuck in. This idea that if I feel bad long enough, eventually I'll feel good. But friends, pain doesn't work like that. Guilt is meant to be a teacher, not a long-term roommate. And look, I get it. It can feel like a betrayal to stop feeling guilty. But the real betrayal is abandoning yourself in the name of punishment. That's not accountability. That's self-abandonment. And you deserve more than that. You're not here to carry your guilt like a badge. You're here to learn from it, then let it go. You can love who you've become without hating who you were. One of the hardest truths, you can't forgive what you won't even admit to yourself. I mean, let's just sit with that for a second. Forgiveness, real, honest to God forgiveness, can't happen in the dark. And yet, that's exactly where most of us try to do it. We try to shove the guilt into some back room in our brain, lock the door, and hope that if we just don't look at it too long, eventually it'll go away. Or we tell ourselves, wasn't that bad? Or that time's passed, or that other people have done worse. We rationalize and minimize because deep down, we're afraid that if we really looked at it, really faced it, It would wreck us. But here's what I've learned, not just from research, but from walking through it myself. Immunizing doesn't soften guilt, it preserves it. It's like putting a bandage over a wound you never cleaned. From the outside, it looks like you took care of it, but underneath, it's still festering. And so many of us are walking around with emotional infections, wondering why we can't move on. The truth is, honesty is the front door to healing. And I'm not talking about dramatic public confessions. I'm not saying you need to spill everything to the world, but you do need to tell the truth, at least to yourself. You need to name what happened, name how it made you feel, name who it hurt. You need to be real about the regret. That's not weakness. That's emotional bravery. It can look like sitting down with a journal and writing the sentence you've been avoiding. It can sound like saying out loud to a trusted friend or therapist, I've been carrying this thing and I think it's time I finally talk about it. It's uncomfortable. I won't pretend it's not. But discomfort is not the same thing as danger. In fact, it's the birthplace of growth. When we finally name what we've been hiding, we take the first step toward freedom. Not because saying it magically makes it okay, but because the truth grounds us. And forgiveness can only happen when we're standing in the truth, not a watered down version, not the edited highlight reel, the real thing. I remember sitting across from someone once, this was years ago, and they said to me, I don't even know what I need to forgive myself for. I just know I feel awful all the time. And I gently asked, what would you say out loud if shame wasn't listening? They got really quiet. Tears. And then the truth came. And it wasn't the end of their pain, but it was the beginning of their healing. So often, the guilt we can't forgive isn't about what we did. It's about what we've refused to feel. And the irony is, we think hiding it protects us, but the truth is, unspoken guilt grows teeth. It gnaws at our peace, it bites into our confidence. And the only way to tame it is to name it. So if you're stuck, if you keep circling back to the same moment, the same mistake, the same feeling, it might be time to sit down and say the thing. Even if your voice shakes, even if no one else ever hears it but you, forgiveness doesn't start with letting go. It starts with letting it in. This is where most people stop listening, because we've been taught that if you feel guilty, you should just sit in it forever, like penance makes you pure. But here's the deal, accountability matters, and it's not the same as self-punishment. There's this cultural confusion where we think taking responsibility means self-flagellation. You mess up and you feel bad, so you sit in the shame and guilt like it's some kind of emotional jail cell. And the longer you sit, the more deserving you are of release. But that's not justice, that's emotional paralysis. It doesn't lead to growth. It leads to isolation, disconnection, and this awful belief that we're no longer worthy of being okay again. Accountability is not about suffering, it's about movement. When we actually take responsibility, it's not a passive thing, it's active. It's grounded in courage and self-awareness. It looks like saying, I did this, I'm not proud of it, and here's what I'm doing to make it right. And I want to be clear, sometimes you can make direct amends and sometimes you can't. The person you hurt might be gone, they might not want to hear from you, or maybe the harm isn't something you can undo. That doesn't mean you're off the hook. It just means the work turns inward. You show your accountability by how you live going forward, by how you treat people, by how you honor the lesson. But accountability does not mean indefinite self-punishment. That's not noble. That's just another way we armor up. Because if I keep punishing myself, I never actually have to be vulnerable again. I don't have to risk forgiveness or joy or connection because I've already decided I don't deserve it. I've seen this in the data and in real life. People will hold themselves hostage in the name of growth, thinking if they suffer enough, it proves they've changed. But suffering isn't proof of healing. Change is. how you show up differently, how you make different choices. That's what matters. And here's the hard truth. Sometimes the hardest part of forgiveness is not about the guilt. It's about giving up the identity we created around it. We get used to being the person who messed up. It becomes part of our internal narrative. So when we talk about forgiveness, we're also talking about identity reconstruction. Who are you without the constant self-punishment? What happens when you release the role of the unworthy one? That's scary. It really is, because punishment, while painful, can feel safe, predictable. Forgiveness, on the other hand, requires hope, and that can feel vulnerable. But accountability, the real kind, is what builds the bridge from guilt to grace. And you don't have to build that bridge all at once. You lay it down piece by piece with truth, with repair, with a willingness to grow. And eventually you find yourself standing on the other side, not because you forgot what happened, but because you honored it and chose not to live there anymore. So no, this isn't about skipping over the consequences. It's about refusing to confuse consequences with a life sentence. There's a lie shame loves to tell. Because you messed up, you don't deserve joy, connection, or rest. And it sounds convincing, right? It shows up in that quiet voice in your head that says, you don't get to relax, you haven't made up for it yet, or who do you think you are to laugh or love or feel good again after what you did? That voice is relentless. It sounds like self-awareness, but it's actually self-condemnation in disguise. But let me say this with every fiber of my being. Being human is not a disqualification, it's the whole point. We are wired for struggle. That's not a flaw in the design, it is the design. We were never meant to get everything right. That's not what makes us worthy. What makes us worthy is the simple, sacred fact that we are alive, that we are trying, that we keep showing up, even after we fall flat on our face. I think we internalize this idea somewhere early on that love and belonging are conditional. You earn them when you're good, when you follow the rules, when you succeed. So when we mess up, when we fall short, we feel like we've broken some kind of invisible contract. And the consequence, disconnection, isolation, we think we have to exile ourselves from joy until we're better. But here's the truth I've seen in thousands of stories and years of research. Shame grows in silence, but it dies in empathy. And empathy doesn't wait until you're perfect. It says, I see your mess, and I still see you. The hardest work is letting that voice become your own. And let me give you a really simple example. I was talking with someone who had said something hurtful in a moment of anger, something they deeply regretted. And they told me, every time something good happens, I just feel like I don't deserve it, like I have to keep punishing myself. And I asked them gently, do you think the version of you who said that awful thing, do you think they need punishment or do they need healing? And they paused, and there it was, healing. What they needed wasn't more self-rejection. They needed compassion, accountability, yes, but also healing. Because here's the deal. Growth doesn't happen when you hate yourself into it. Growth happens when you love yourself through it. You can hold yourself responsible and hold yourself with grace. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, real transformation requires both. Without responsibility, there's no direction. Without compassion, there's no fuel to get there. You're not meant to pay for your mistakes with your joy. You're meant to let your mistakes teach you something and then let joy remind you that you're still alive, still human, still deserving of love. So if you're walking around with this belief that you're too flawed, too far gone, too messed up to belong, please hear this. You're not too much. You're not too broken. You are exactly human. And your humanity is not a problem to fix. It's the reason we get to keep trying. Forgiveness is a process, not a performance. And oh my gosh, do we struggle with that? We want it to be clean, quick, and one and done. We want to say, okay, I forgive myself and feel instantly lighter, freer, better. But the truth is, forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, isn't a light switch. It's more like weather. Some days are clear, some days are stormy. Some days you think you've moved past it completely, and then something small, a memory, a song, a comment blows through, and there it is again. Guilt, shame, regret. And the temptation in those moments is to say, ugh, I guess I haven't really forgiven myself after all. But it's not failure, that's grieving. Forgiveness is messy because healing is layered. We're not machines. We don't just press a button and delete emotional pain. We're complex feeling, remembering beings. And sometimes we have to forgive the same thing 100 times, especially if it's tangled up in our sense of identity. And let me just say this, it's okay if it takes time. There's no medal for rushing through your healing. The deeper the wound, the more patience it takes to mend. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because you're doing it honestly. You know, I often hear people say, I thought I forgave myself, but I still feel bad sometimes. And what I tell them is, that doesn't mean your forgiveness wasn't real. It just means your emotions are still catching up with the truth. Because self-forgiveness isn't about never feeling pain again. It's about refusing to let that pain define who you are today. And yeah, there will be days when your inner critic gets loud again. Days when shame comes knocking with its old, tired messages. You're not good enough. You're not trustworthy. You don't deserve peace. And those are the days when forgiveness becomes an active choice. A muscle you keep strengthening, a practice. Forgiveness isn't passive. It's something you do. It's a boundary you set with shame. It's the moment you say, yes, I did that. And I've grown. And I'm not living in that version of myself anymore. You may not be able to erase what happened, but you get to choose how you carry it. You can carry it like proof that you're unlovable, or you can carry it like a reminder that you're resilient, that you've learned, that you survived. And one last thing, because this part matters. There's no right way to forgive yourself. Some people write letters they'll never send. Some people pray. Some people go to therapy or sit in silence or take long walks until the weight feels a little lighter. However you do it, the most important thing is that it comes from a place of truth. Not performance, not pretending, but real, grounded grace. You don't have to get it perfect. You just have to keep showing up. So here's what I want you to remember as you walk out of this space, whether that's a room, or just the quiet corner of your mind where this conversation has landed. You are allowed to outgrow the version of yourself that made those mistakes. You are allowed to hold the past with honesty and still step into your future with hope. And you are allowed, deeply worthy in fact, of the kind of forgiveness that doesn't erase the past, but transforms your relationship with it. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to be whole, to learn, to fall, to rise again, and to do it all with as much courage and truth as you can muster. Forgiving yourself isn't weakness. It's not letting yourself off the hook. It's claiming your humanity. And when you do that, you don't just free yourself from guilt, you free yourself for joy, for love, for connection, for growth. And maybe, just maybe, today's the day you stop asking, do I deserve to be free of this? And start asking that, what would my life look like if I finally believed that I am? You've got this.